Hi, Dalila. Good to see you or to have you here. So tonight is the LOTE, and I think we'll talk about the lesson plan because we've done the pedagogy recently and we've done the speaking. So let me pull up a lesson plan. So the lesson plan is 4% of the test, and it makes people nervous because you don't get any resources, right? So you just have to be able to quickly write a lesson plan. You only get 35 minutes to write both the lesson plan and the essay in English. Oh, and before we start, I want to show you the passing rate for the LOTE is 53%. So it actually has been going up a little bit, which is good news, right? It used to be as low as 40%, and now it's up to 53%, but that's still a pretty bad rate. You can see most tests have a higher passing rate. So it's important for us to prepare. So the lesson plan, if we just go to Google and type in Texas NES-INC manual, click on prepare, and then scroll down and click on LOTE 613, click on go. You can see right here, number 9, sample foreign language pedagogy instructional practice assignments. This is where the lesson plan and the essay in English are. And let's look at a rubric of how to get a perfect score. You need to fully address all categories, vocabulary, materials, procedures, and assessment. Show a high degree of content understanding, and your information needs to be accurate and well developed. Your teaching techniques need to be appropriate for the age, grade, and proficiency level. The materials and activities must be appropriate for the age, grade, and proficiency level. The assessment instrument described elicits appropriate information on targeted learning objective. Response is well organized and generally coherent. So one of the biggest mistakes people make is not focusing on the objective, right? So let's look at a lesson plan. This is a lesson plan on a poem. Some people tell me, well, I thought a lesson plan on a poem and I did your lesson plan and I got a 0. Well, I don't know what your lesson plan objective is going to be. I never ask that. And even if somebody were to tell me, I would disregard it because we don't share parts of the test, right? That's against the affidavit that we sign. So I wrote a generic one about a poem, but if you happen to get one about a poem, you have to cater your activities to the objective that you're given. So here, this objective is students will discuss in the target language their readings of the poem and have a discussion with a partner. But maybe yours says they do presentational communication, right? So yours has to be different. This is given to you. The school grade, 5th year high school. The student profile, 16 to 18 years of age, that's given to you. The proficiency level is also given to you, advanced range. At the advanced level, they should know all verb tenses and be able to communicate at the paragraph level. If you don't know the ACTFL level, that's something I teach in my course. So you can, learn about that in my course, or you can Google the ACTFL proficiency guidelines and read the whole document and learn about that. They give you the theme topic, a poem from the target culture. They give you the objective. Students will discuss in the target language their readings of the poem and have a discussion with a partner. They give you the length of unit. Then you have to fill out the vocabulary that needs to relate to the topic and objective, right? You have to fill out the materials, the procedures, activities, and you fill out the assessment, right? Keeping in mind the objective. So let's look at this poem first before we look at the lesson plan. So this is a famous poem by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who is probably the most famous Latin American author. He's most known for writing Cien Años de Soledad, but he wrote lots of other things. So I'll read this poem and then we'll look at the lesson plan. Si supiera que esta fuese la última vez que te veo salir por esa puerta, te daría un abrazo, un beso, te llamaría de nuevo para darte más. Si supiera que esta fuera la última vez que voy a oír tu voz, grabaría cada una de tus palabras para poder oírlas una y otra vez indefinidamente. Si supiera que estos son los últimos minutos que te veo, diría te quiero y no asumiría tontamente que ya lo sabes. Siempre hay un mañana y la vida nos da otra oportunidad para hacer las cosas bien. Pero por si me equivoco y hoy es todo lo que nos queda, me gustaría decirte cuánto te quiero, que nunca te olvidaré. It's a beautiful poem. And I like it because it's great for advanced students because it uses the past subjunctive, it uses the conditional, right? So it uses some of these more challenging tenses that they're learning. So now let's look at the objective again, because it's important that everything we do focus on the objective. Students will discuss in the target language their readings of the poem and have a discussion with the partner. Right, so let's look at my vocabulary. My vocabulary is from the poem. So we need to memorize a few words from the poem to be able to write them on a lesson plan, right? Probably about 8 words is good. Supiera, if I knew. Grabaría, estrofa, asumiría, indefinidamente, me equivoco, olvidaré. So notice I wrote the words in Spanish and English. We actually write the lesson plan in English on the LOTE, right? But I think the vocabulary words need to be written in both languages. So that's the vocabulary words. Materials, puzzles with vocabulary words, copies of the poem Si Supiera, and a video. So now let's look at our procedures, activities. Notice I wrote it by day because it says length of unit, 3 class periods of 50 minutes each. Right, so day 1, the teacher will start by pre-teaching the vocabulary words. She will encourage students to participate and share if they already know some of these words. As they go over the words, she will point out some are using the conditional and future tenses. Next, she will show a video about the author Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Next, she will ask volunteers to read 1 stanza of the poem. They will have a class discussion about what they understood. Next, in partners, they will analyze each stanza and what they understood. So notice I already hit the objective. They discussed the reading with a partner, right? And I said how I'll teach vocabulary words. You'll lose points if you don't do that. You have to say how you're going to teach the vocabulary words. So on day 1, we've hit the objective, which is great, but we still have 2 more days to go. Day 2, the teacher will review the vocabulary words again. Students will have puzzle pieces with the vocabulary words on some pieces and a definition in Spanish on the other pieces. They will put the puzzles together. Native and heritage speakers and advanced students will have some more challenging vocabulary words, and struggling students will have a glossary. So I'm differentiating instruction. I'm meeting the needs of different learners. After the vocabulary puzzle, students will work with a partner to look for new insight about the poem. So again, they're discussing the poem, which is our objective. Notice I used a kinesthetic activity where they're using their hands, their bodies, right? They're putting puzzles together. That makes learning a little bit non-linguistic, which is helpful. Day 3, students will write a reflection about their poem and they will discuss the reflection with a partner. Again, they're discussing, we hit the objective. Why did I have them write something? Because when they're advanced students, they should be able to write at the paragraph level. We want to challenge them. So I had a writing activity as well. For a formal assessment, the teacher will circulate and listen to each pair discuss the reflection. For an informal assessment, the teacher will check if they completed the vocabulary puzzle. So see, the lesson plan doesn't have to be very long. In fact, some people have told me that they've bought lesson plans from other sources that are super long, like pages and pages. And that might be great if you're writing a lesson plan that you're going to use in real life. But when you get 35 minutes to write a lesson plan and an essay in English, we don't have time to write pages, and they don't expect that, right? In fact, if we look at this, it tells us you should probably have about 200 words. That's not a lot of words. So it doesn't have to be super detailed, right? Where you want the detail is your descriptions of procedures and activities, but the rest is not super detailed, right? So the biggest mistakes people make, and this is information I got from the testing agency that put together a conference on biggest mistakes, is not hitting the objective, and then on the vocabulary words, not putting their accent marks where they belong. So if you use vocabulary words that have accents, you need to put the accents on there like I did, right? If you're taking the test, they're going to have a little keyboard that pops up that has the little accent marks already on it. So it's super easy to do. So you don't have to know the codes. You don't have to have an international keyboard or anything like that. So that's the lesson plan. So in free tutoring, that's really quick. I just spend a little bit of time going over one topic. But in my Wednesday night groups, we spend a whole hour going into detail. So the night that we do the lesson plan, we go over the lesson plan for a poem and also for a play, right? And sometimes we even look at additional lesson plans. We practice a lot of speaking. We've We go over the writing tasks and how to do that, and I teach where to put accent marks, the rules. We do lots of listening and reading practice. And when we do listening and reading, I do what the test does, and I mix in the cultural understanding, right? So I get you ready for the whole test, not just some people say, I only want to work on the pedagogy. That's the biggest part of the test. And for most people, it's the hardest. And it does make the sense to put the most emphasis on that. But I've noticed that when people only study for the pedagogy, they usually fail the test because they need to get ready for the whole test, even if Spanish is their first language, because it's not just do you know Spanish? It's can you think about topics you haven't seen before in a limited amount of time and put together coherent ideas, which is hard for some of us to do in either language, right? So we practice all of those things. So if you're interested, I can send you the link for the course in tutoring where we go into more detail. I have to get ready for another tutoring session tonight, but I definitely have some time for questions. Do you guys have questions?
Yes, Courtney. I want to know when I can start it again, the study for the test.
Oh, you can start whenever you want. I would love to have you if you're ready. I haven't heard back from Miss Johnson or Dr. Johnson. So
Well,
if
yes, what I planning to do is hopefully Friday I can go over there and I wanna, write it down. They're gonna accept me on pace, even if they don't wanna be for load, but it can be easy through six. And then as soon as they give me the write it down, they're gonna accept me. I gonna study for the test and go ahead and do my certification.